Hey, what's up, Skywalker with Imagination Creation Films, and today we're talking about time-lapsing with the Nikon Z8, and why? It's great. So before we get started, a little housekeeping. Nikon did send this Z8 over to me for evaluation, but no money has changed hands, and they don't have any say in this whatsoever. I'm just shooting a bunch of videos to help you understand how to get the most out of your Z8, because I care. So time-lapsing is a lot of fun, and there's a lot of things to think about and consider. It's an art. It's not just this is how you do it, and it's done. But I'm going to change all that and say, this is how you do it. No, I'm just going to tell you how I typically do outdoor daytime, cloud people, passage of time kind of time-lapsing. And the Z8 is actually exceptionally good at time-lapsing for a lot of reasons. Number one, it can shoot time-lapse at 8K. Amazing. Shoots it at RAW, has really good dynamic range. It has a built-in intervalometer. What's not to love? It also can do smoothing really well. Let's go in and talk about what I like to do on the Z8 and things you might consider in time-lapsing. So a lot of the art in time-lapsing is knowing how much motion blur to inject. We're trying to show the passage of time. So let's take, for instance, an example of you have this beautiful cathedral and you have clouds going by and you have so many people that are walking by it. You don't want to see the people going staccato.
We go to town.
Yeah,
go to town.
Wait, hold on. Wait, what's bup?
We want to see them kind of flurrying by really fast, and to do that with motion blur. And with motion blur, you can control how much that is, because a normal motion blur of a person walking, you'd barely notice it. But if we show streaks, it looks like everything's happening really fast. We get that sense of time. Now, to do that, we need a shutter speed on our camera that's beyond reasonable for the daytime. If you take the camera and you put it out there in the sun, it's going to say, I want to be 1,000th of a second. And you don't want that, because that would be very staccato. We want to be, I try to follow the 180-degree rule as a general rule of thumb on my time lapses. So if I'm going to do 10-second intervals, a 5-second shutter drag is right where I want to be. And you can work it both directions. I tend to work from what I'm looking for as far as an aesthetic, the motion blur, and then how long I want my playback to be. So 5 seconds of time passage, that means a person walking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're going to be this far in your image as a blur. That'll show a lot of time. So 5 seconds. In order to get a 5-second exposure on this, you would need to put it at like f22 and an ISO of like 1. Well, that's not pleasing. I like to shoot at a fairly wide open aperture. I'm typically in the f4 to f5.6 range on this type of camera, but I will shoot at 2.8, sometimes even closer, or wider, like a 1.4. But to do that, the ISO would need to be exceptionally low, which this one has a really nice low ISO, but it's not that low. So we need an ND filter. And we need not just any ND filter, we need a severe ND filter. This is an ND13. This is a Firecrest IRND, which is really good, but I mean, you can see, you don't see light through it because it's really dark. But what this does do is it's an IRND 13 stop filter. It allows this shutter speed to slow way down in the middle of the day. Now, let's think about playback for a second. How long on screen do we really want to show this time lapse? unless it's something like a gorgeous Milky Way that's just kind of awe-inspiring and you want people glued to their monitor for a minute, you're probably not going to have it on the screen too long. In fact, most time lapses, I would say, would last anywhere from 1 to 5 seconds of playback. And at 24 frames a second, that's 24 frames up to 120 frames. That's 2 to 5 seconds. So you need to consider, how much time are you trying to capture? Or are you just trying to convey time? If I'm doing this cathedral and I want to show that it's busy, then I don't need to show hours and hours of the day. That could show even more passage of time, but if I'm just going to put 4 seconds on the screen, then I really only need 96 shots. I always round it up to 100, gives me 2 on either side, so I can kind of shift it a little bit if I need to. But maybe I want to do a sunset at the cathedral right behind it and show people going by. Well, I'm going to need to go over an hour, but if I'm only going to display that for, say, 4 seconds, I really only need 100 shots. So I need my interval to be an hour, 60 minutes divided by 100, which is going to place it at like 45 seconds. And then I would need my shutter speed to be like 20 seconds. You're gonna need a little more ND, so you can stack them. It's not always best, but it kind of does some weird reflections issues sometimes with the sun, but it's not the end of the world. But in our case, cloud movement, people movement, I tend to do 5-second shutter and a 10-second exposure. Let's go into the camera and show what we need to show here. So first thing we need to do is make sure you're at full frame, and I like to shoot RAW plus JPEG. And the reason I like to do that is it allows me to get JPEGs out quickly, which I can just throw in my timeline and see how that is going to look. Now, the interval recording is down in the photo shooting menu, and it's almost all the way at the bottom, right there. I've added it to my menu, and I put it at the top. Now, something to consider is with interval shooting, as soon as you click start, it starts. So you need to set up your shot ahead of time. I like to put it on manual focus. We're going to set a 5-second exposure. I'm going to go 2.8, and I'm going to do ISO 800. You can do your ISO however you need to. Obviously, the higher it is, the noisier it's going to be. But this, during the day, typically gets me right around where I need to be. So now, focus it and turn off autofocus. We're going to go into menu. We're going to go into interval timer shooting. We're going to click it. We're going to go down, choose start day of time of day. So let's say we had to get there early at the cathedral to get that sunset shot. And we don't want the time lapse to start until 6 o'clock. You can set that right here and it will wait. Interval, this is literally how long between the shots. So you can do seconds, minutes, hours. It's very versatile on how much. Your interval and your number of shots. So 100 shots and 1 per interval. Now we're going to go down to exposure smoothing. Exposure smoothing, if you have ISO auto turned on, it will ramp that up and down to help the exposure. That's good, but I tend to use DaVinci Resolve because DaVinci Resolve has some really good smoothing in there as well. If you use LR time lapse and Lightroom, that's another way to do it, but you could do it in here. I leave it on just in case I want to use it, but if ISO is set to a physical setting, then it won't be on. Interval priority will make it advance to the next frame, whether the camera's ready or not. We don't really care. Focus before each shot, you can do that, but I tend to turn off autofocus, and I turn off that feature because I don't want it hunting. If a person walks in front, right, the camera's gonna focus on them and then go back to the cathedral. That's gonna make it do this kind of pumping action, and we don't like that. So then we have down here options. So you can do a time-lapse video where it's gonna put it to a 4K video, or you could do bracketing where it will take, say, 3 exposures. And that will allow you to get, say, an HDR type of image where you expose one really overexposed and one underexposed and one just right. That allows you all the highlights and the shadow details, really high dynamic range. But you're talking like 5 times the amount of work in post. It's going to be a bear, but it can be done. I just choose off. Now, starting storage folder, you can tell it time-lapse 1, go to time-lapse 1. And then your next time-lapse, you can tell it go to time-lapse 2. It's pretty nice. It keeps all your files in one location. Now, again, when I click start, it's going. It's taking its photos. And it's just going to keep going. So make sure you have it set up ahead of time, your shot. To cancel it, it's weird, you turn it off. To go back in, if I hit menu and go into it, it's going to say, do you want to resume? You can restart that. I'm just going to go back and off. But that is, in a nutshell, time-lapsing on the Nikon Z8. It's very versatile, it's very clean, it looks great, and I've gotten some really amazing shots out of it. Now, a couple of things to consider with time-lapsing. My nose is really itchy today, sorry. If you have the clouds passing and the cathedral and the people walking by, the people walking by are going to be these streaks. They're going to look nice. The clouds are going to be fluffy and floating because they don't move that fast. If you have grass in front of the camera lens and it's a windy day, well, that grass is going to be doing this number, even though you have the motion blur, because it can't go far because it's planted. So I tend to not put grass or bushes or anything in there. If you're time-lapsing on a windy day and you have trees in the background, you're going to get the same thing. It's going to look bad. It's going to look like, oh, this is not artsy. This is just generic time-lapse. I try not to shoot on windy days with trees or plants or anything static that's moving, or the wacky inflatable arm guy. Otherwise, there's a lot of different ways you could do it. Like I said, there's 1,000 ways you could shoot time-lapse, and none of them are wrong. This is how I typically do it, and it's a great way to get you started right off the bat. Just using the Nikon Z8 and then a filter. And you don't have to have the filter if you're doing like a long exposure at night. It's awesome. If you have any questions about time-lapsing, put them down in the comment section down below. I'll try to respond to them. If you have any specific questions on what I might do in a certain situation. Remember to like and subscribe, and please use the affiliate links down below if you're interested in the Nikon Z8 or the IRND filter from Firecrest. But if you really want to stand out and be part of the cool kids club, you might consider being a channel member like these fine individuals. And as always, as I like to leave it, don't let your passions center around your life. Let your life center around your passions.